exercise. Starting our exercise, we are going to go to Adobe Premiere Creative Cloud 2018. And we're going to, maybe if we haven't already, found the footage that we're going to use. Oh wait, we're already opened up. And we're going to start a new project. When we start a new project, the first thing we're going to see is the name section. And this is pretty basic. For our cases here, we're going to write flowers, edit, exercise. And the next most important, perhaps even more important than what you name your project, is the location. Now, I don't have an external hard drive connected to this computer right now, but if I did, I might have a lot of my footage on it, and it also might be advantageous to me to go to this Browse button and to go find the hard drive that I'm editing off of and click there to create my project file. But as you can see, I've actually already started a folder called Editing Our Exercise. It's right there on the desktop, and it's already been selected. So we're going to choose that, and there's actually already a Premiere project in there. I wonder why. But we're going to use this one. Now, going through our basic menu, for everybody to have this on record, as I've said before, we have a couple of different options. There's this video rendering and playback window up here at the top. And this isn't something that we really have to worry about. From what I understand about how rendering works, I would think that this might be an option that's only relevant to people that have multiple graphics cards inside of their computer and different ways of rendering video. So what they would do is maybe go, oh, I want to use, I don't even really know what these different options are, to be perfectly honest. The Mercury Playback Engine. From what I understand, the OpenCL option is probably just a library that's used by your computer to render the graphics. In terms of video, you'll see that the other options are entirely related to film, 16mm 35, and just film frames themselves. And since we're using video, we will be dealing with timecode. Now, timecode is usually really useful in cases in which you can synchronize the timecode on all of the devices that are present during the recording. So for example, your audio recorder might have one timecode, your camera may have another timecode, and right before you start shooting, you'd want to set them to be the same thing. We are going to display our audio as audio samples, and in terms of capture, we are not using any capture decks, so we do not really have to worry about this option. This just means that you're using a DV, digital video capture deck. Now, if we go up to, this is an option that we actually might have to worry about, the one about scratch disks, because this is where all of the video that you are generating is going to live. It's usually fastest to do it all on the hard drive of the computer. So one could imagine that if you were capturing video, you might want to capture it to an external hard drive. Right now everything's set to the same as project, which is good for our purposes because we're doing a very lightweight editing exercise. The files that we're using are very small. But maybe you'd be importing some video that might be very large and you might want to store it on an external hard drive. So you would browse and maybe go find another place that you want to put that captured video. And the same goes for audio, video previews, audio previews, and autosave. Adobe Premiere actually has a very, very robust autosave. It has saved my life many times, and if you're doing this class, it probably will save your life a few times. And if not your life, at the very least, the progress that you've made on your project. So what we're going to do is find a good place for that to go, and maybe I'm actually going to make, because the autosaves are going to be generated every 5 to 10 minutes, or depending on how many things we do, we don't want a bunch of autosaves to just start filling up our entire editing exercise window. So maybe we'll make a new folder and we'll say, this is flowers autosaves. And that's where those are going to go. So you can see that I've already modified one of these things in a way that's just making my life a little bit easier. It's just keeping my desktop clean. If you are like me and maybe you're in a rush at a moment, you don't really have to worry about this. Your autosaves will just end up in the same folder that your editing exercise is in. The library downloads, you may not need to worry about for this project. I'm sure that having it the same as a project will be okay. And motion graphics templates, it's probably fine. Ingest settings is something that we will go over later in the semester when you may be filming things that are larger file sizes. In this case, as we have probably seen by now, what we downloaded, or rather it's not in the downloads anymore, but what's in our editing exercise, this flowers file, is a mere 41 megabytes of high definition video. Now, sometimes if you're editing things that are in 4K, they might be orders of magnitude larger than that. This is about a 5-minute long video that's only 41 megabytes. 5 minutes of 4K footage could be 20 gigabytes. Something that is on a more high definition camera could even be larger than that. So what you might want to do in that case, which we'll go over later when it becomes relevant, is actually set it so that when you ingest, oh, we don't have Media Coder installed on this computer, so maybe we won't worry about it. I'll just describe it for now. You might want to set it so that when you import that high definition, very large file, that your computer will make a copy of it that is a smaller resolution copy. And then when you edit, you'll be able to edit a lot quicker. So does that make sense to everybody? It's sort of like that's what that setting is going to be used for, is if you were editing with large files, it's a way that you can have the program automatically generate smaller resolution copies of it. Okay.
Is it like really tiny and like pixelated, or like?
It's not tiny and pixelated. They make an effort. It's actually just sort of converting it. So it'd be like if you had all these really large WAV files, converting them to MP3s. They'll still probably sound about the same, and if you were editing them, they'd be the same, but they're not the full resolution. And maybe if you were, making a movie that was going to be on a giant screen, it might actually make a difference. So for now, it looks like we've actually set everything up pretty well. We're going to press OK. Now, this is the dark world of an empty Adobe Premiere project. We can see that we have a bunch of rectangles that look about the same, and we have two prompts written in very, very small letters. One says import media to start. And so we will do precisely that. And we know where our media is because our media is any piece of video or audio or photos, PNGs, JPEGs, and for now we're going to be working with this flowers file. So we import it, and Adobe immediately gives it a little bit of information about it. It tells us that the duration is 3 minutes. I guess I was a little bit wrong. I said it was 4. It's 3 minutes and 24 seconds. The frame rate of what I downloaded is 24 frames per second. You'll sometimes see sequences that are at 23.96 frames per second or 30 frames per second. But this one's at 24. 24 is what most things you see on the internet, most things that you see in a movie theater, it's a standard frame rate. And we're also going to import our song. I downloaded this song by Aphex Twin, and I'm going to take that and drop it into my project. Now, I have my two essential components that are going to make up my project. And if I double-click on this one, you can see. Now this is very interesting actually. This is a great little learning moment for me. For those that are watching this video, I did start this project before, and I can see that all of the markers that I made earlier have been retained. So I guess that when you write them, you're actually writing them straight to the video. When Adobe Premiere reads that video, it's actually going to save the markers. So that's very useful if you're sharing your project with other people. But I just cleared all the markers so that you can kind of get a sense of what we're doing from the start. You've got this piece of video, and you know that you want to use this raw video to make your own original piece, right? So the first thing you're going to do is maybe see what interests you in the footage. And I already know, because I've worked with this footage before, that there are a number of shots in this time lapse that are of flowers head-on. And so what I'm going to do is, you'll see that right here I have a little thing that says add marker. And I'm going to just, as my first kind of practicing good editorial hygiene, this window is a preview window. So I haven't actually created a sequence. I haven't actually started editing yet. I'm just looking at what I have. And I know that I like this moment, and I'm going to make a mark roughly where it is. So that's, you press the M button, add marker, or I could click down here if I wanted to, and I can even give different colors to it. I can write comments. You can turn it into being a chapter marker if it's a DVD. But for us, we're just using this for ourselves to have good editorial hygiene. I'm going to look for other moments where I'm seeing a flower bloom head on, and I'm going to mark them. This one's pretty good. That one's definitely head on. Whoops, that was wrong. Right there, marker, and mark this one, that one. And hopefully by now you've also picked a few things that you like, and maybe you're ready to actually start editing them. Now, what we don't have is we do have another text prompt right here that says drop media here to create sequence. And this is a very tricky moment in Adobe Premiere because you'll find that, let's say, for example, I had some other assets that I wanted to add into this project, like this goofy guy emoji. I'm going to put this goofy guy emoji into my project. I'm going to rename him Goofball, and I'm going to take him and just drag him into here. And you'll see that what's happened is that whatever the first thing that I've dragged to respond to that prompt is going to set the resolution and the frame rate of the sequence that I'm editing in. So you have to be kind of careful with this, right? If you drag an audio track in, you'll see that it's created a new sequence with the same name as the clip. And if I right-click on it and I say, well, tell me a little bit more about the properties of this sequence, that it's created a 480 by 480 sequence. Now that's not if we right-click on our flowers, which is the video content that we're going to be editing in. We click on the properties of that, we can see that it's 1920 by 1080, the standard high-definition video format. It's MPEG, it's 24 frames per second. So this can just lead, I bring this up as a sort of prefatory note because this can lead to issues when you're a little further along in the process and you're getting ready to export. You've done all this editing. I can't tell you how many times a student has come to me and go, hey, I edited everything and it looks great, but everything's in a square. Because you'll see that if I put this flower footage in here, it is just squared off. And this could be useful. If you were making content for Instagram, you might want to do something like go over to Google Chrome and say Instagram resolution. And you'd be like, okay, it's 1080 by 1080. And then you would want to right-click, rather go up to File, New Sequence, and say, okay, I'm going to make something for Instagram. Well, how do I do that? You go Settings, and then this is actually a very important detail that I elided the first time that I showed you guys the new sequence settings. I showed you all of these presets. You don't need to use a preset. That's actually kind of my bad. You can just click on Settings right here and say that you're going to use a custom editing mode. The time base is going to be 24 frames per second because we remember we looked at, in fact, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to edit a square video for Instagram just because I think that that's relatable and it actually allows us that opportunity to look at some of these things more in depth. So we're going to go to video and we're going to set it as we would the canvas for Photoshop to 1080 by 1080, a square. The pixels are square, the fields, all of this stuff we don't really have to worry about. The audio sample rate is high, 48,000 hertz. We're using samples, and the previews are all going to be in MPEG. And our previews, let's actually just set our previews to being 1080 by 1080 as well. So that's good.
Where did you go for the new sequence thing?
I went to File and to, sorry, let me just name the sequence first. So I'm just going to name this. Let's say Flowers Insta. And you'll see that I made a square one. But what's nice about it is if we look at this square sequence that we created earlier, remember we look at the properties, that's only 480 by 480. If you tried to put that into Instagram, it would look pixelated. But because we kind of looked up what we were aiming to produce for, and we found out like, oh, it's actually the maximum res for Instagram is 1080 by 1080, that's how we did that. And to your question, I went to File, New, Sequence. And then I pressed Settings rather than Sequence Presets. And in Settings, I changed the editing mode to AVC HD 1080p square pixel, the time base to, no, actually I didn't do that. I did custom for this one. I did custom because that allows me to set it to whatever I want. I set it to 24 frames per second, frame size 1080 by 1080 because it's a 1:1 aspect ratio. You'll see also this is very handy that the program will automatically compute what your aspect ratio is. So if you've ever seen something where it says like, oh yeah, is that in 4:3? So you can say like, what's a 4:3 HD resolution? And so something like 1440 by 1080, right? So if I change this to 1440, it says now it's automatically computed that it's 4:3. And if I add something like that, it's going to give me this crazy aspect ratio, 289 by 216. But we're sticking with 1080 by 1080, 1:1. Okay, so you should have created a sequence by now to start your editing. And if you I think just for the sake of everybody, let's do a square video. So I think maybe go through those steps if you didn't. If you already have a sequence, it's all good. So I've got this Flowers Insta sequence, which is a 1080 by 1080 sequence. And I have this footage, flowers.mp4, which is in 1920 by 1080, right? We right-click on it, and we know this is the normal aspect ratio for high-definition video, 1920 by 1080. So, what do we think is going to happen if we drag and drop this in here? It's going to crop it. In fact, the crop will be something like this, which maybe that's the reason why I picked everything where there are things in the center. But maybe we don't want to take our video and drag the whole video in here. And it will give you a question like this if you're dealing with two different settings. It'll say the clip does not match the sequence's setting. Change sequence to match the clip's settings. In this case, we don't want to do that. Maybe in other cases you might want to do that, but in this case we want to keep our existing settings because it's going to crop the video and let us make a square video, which is our intended deliverable, right? To return to where we were at though, maybe putting the whole video in here isn't that good. We have all of our markers, but what we'll be stuck doing is maybe, I don't know, we'll be zooming in and going, okay, so I like this part, right? And you might drag this and be like, okay, I like this part, and then I'm going to copy it and paste it, and then maybe I'll drag it out again. You know, it's a little bit more labor intensive. I find that if I know that there are pieces of footage that I'm interested in working with, it's usually better to move them from here, the preview window, down one at a time. Now, what do I mean by one at a time? What I mean is that I'm going to go to the marked point, and I'm going to use the left and right buttons, which I could also use as the step forward one frame, step back one frame buttons. But you can also access that by just pressing left and right on your keyboard. And I'm going to find the exact start point of the piece of footage I'm interested in, press the I button, and then maybe I'll play it. And find the out point. And then step my way back with the left button and press the O button. Now these are also available as the mark in and mark out options in Adobe Premiere. And now what I'm going to do is take this piece of footage and drag it right into my sequence. And again, keep the existing settings. So I have this nice little flower here. And then I'm going to just go and follow along and do the same thing for all these clips that are kind of centered and nice. So press play, find another thing I like here, in and out. And you'll see that I didn't drag it from up here. You can also just drag it right from over here. So if you've marked something in and out, and those things are going to stay on the video as well. They're going to stay on the video not forever, but every single time that if I do this, for example, let's say I go, okay, I like this flower, in and then out, and then I go and I look at something else, and I'm like, oh, I want to just listen to the music for a second. Okay, this is what the music sounds like. And then I go and drag that flowers in, it's going to, oh, whoops, I went to the wrong sequence, open that one up. It's going to drag and drop the section that I had just selected, if that makes any sense. Basically what I'm saying is that you can see that the in and out markings will remain there after you've looked at something different. So in and out, drop that one, in and out, drag and drop, in, out, drag and drop. So you can see that now I'm assembling things piece by piece, which is nice. And if I've been doing it a little bit quickly, you know, like if I've just been grabbing things, you know, like, oh, let's see, this one was a flower I liked, in, you know, okay, out. Whoops, I mean, in and then I press P, out. So I'm not actually selecting the exact in and out moments that I want. That's okay. Because what's very interesting about Adobe Premiere, and we also have a little tool palette here, and this tool palette is really for use in the sequence. You'll probably recognize this same kind of icon thing that happens with Photoshop, for example, right? The paint bucket, the little text button, and that's all going to go and be part of the way you interact with the sequence. It's not part of how you interact with your files as they exist over here. So I'm going to get rid of my other sequences that I had open and just focus on my flowers.insta sequence. And you'll see I have a couple different options. Right now I've got this pen tool. And I'm going to actually change it back to the selection tool, the normal cursor, which I guess you can access also by pressing V. And you can see, so I was saying, you know, what if my clip is not exactly the parts that I wanted? What if I want to extend it a little bit or get it smaller? So the advantage of dragging and dropping the clips individually from the project file rather than dragging the whole unedited clip in is that I can go, okay, I'm going to zoom in here and I can expand and contract the footage as it relates to that original piece of footage. So like, you know, oh, maybe this one has a little bit more footage on this end that I didn't know about. I can just extend it and you can see it's showing me up in that window. So I'm like, okay, so I actually could go that far and then this one, okay, I want to make sure it got here. But you kind of, you know, you have this flexibility here, right? So the next thing that we're going to do, because we're editing to sound or to a piece of music that we've already picked, right? And the next thing we're going to do is get rid of the music that was already there, right? Because it's all, so we can see that it all has this piano music. Let me plug something in to make it a little bit louder. I think I've got the audio cable. Huh. Maybe there is an audio cable. Oh no, here it is. So, let's hope that it's still recording my voice. Test. Test. Okay, that's too loud. Do it through. So what I'm going to do now is a handy little trick, because you can see that I can't really dissociate the audio from the video, right? It's always kind of connected and it's moving around. If we look at the sequence settings, for example, we see we have 3 tracks up here and 3 tracks down here of audio. And so this line right here is the one that is allowing us to, you know, see the differences. The videos are all up here and the audios are all down here. And the audio and the video are always moving around together. And so what I'm going to do is I have 2 options. One is this linked selection tool, which means that when I have a piece of video that has a piece of audio with it, I'll always carry the 2 together. And the other one that I'm going to use is the right-click unlink. And what that'll do is it'll allow me to unlink the video and the audio. I might actually use this option because I'm going to delete all of the audio. So I'm going to unclick it, link selections off, and now I'm going to select all of the audio. I could even zoom out so I can see it a little bit better. I'm going to delete all of it. So now we have a bunch of video clips with no audio, which is exactly what we want. And I'm going to just kind of put them all together to give myself a little bit of a better sense of how much time they're going to be taking up. There we go. So now I have these video clips, and what I would normally do is I would pick a little part of the song that I want to use to edit to. So I like the beginning of this song, so I'm going to just press the same thing in and out. I'm going to select out, because I'm just going from the beginning, so all I have to do is press out. Now I have the beginning of the song to about that point. I'll drag it out using this little red guy, just clicking it like that to get it to match this. Now let's see what we got here. A very useful thing, which I can't show you on the screen, but if you you can see it just auto-save for me, which is really nice. You can control and the apostrophe at the top left if you want to full screen your video. Which can be helpful for just, you know, I just added this song, so let's see what that looks like. So you also notice that if you're editing in that square aspect ratio, it's still presenting it in a 1080p, you know, form, right? But that's just for the screen. Those black bars don't actually exist on your sequence. So you can already see that there's a lot of little details that I'm interested in maybe playing around with right now, right? If I zoom in really close, and if I expand the audio track down, you can see the way I did that was by taking this little thingamajig and kind of opening it up like that. I can actually see all of the little drum beats. So something that can be fun to do if you're editing something that has that much detail and that many like sort of different beats and things like that is that you can go in. Give me the echo. And you can use something like the razor blade tool, which is very intuitive. The razor tool is just a tool for cutting video directly. And so I can see where these marks are, where the beats are happening, right? So maybe I make a, whoops, it's maybe a little too much detail, but I'm just going to start making some little cuts where these different drum, and if you're like me and you're using a project like this, maybe then you're going to be like, so I know that I like this, I like these feel different than these drum beats, right? So I'm just going to pick a point that I want to have a different image come in and just see what happens. So I'm going to go here and cut this. And maybe I'll find another moment that I like. Well, actually, no. For starters, let's just do something simple. So I'm going to delete. So you'll see what I did there, right? Was that I found the correspondence between the green drum beats, took the razor blade tool, and I cut that section out. And then I went back to my selection tool, and I deleted it. I'll zoom out and see if there's another image I can use. Maybe like these ones. And so what I'm going to maybe do is go in real nice and close to this one and do the same thing. Razor blade, cut a small piece of it out like a collage. And I'm going to pick that piece up and move it over here. Zoom in again, go down over here. And I'm going to make it a little smaller. Just put it right there. So it doesn't really seem like it's doing very much now, but maybe what we can all do is take a little bit of time and just kind of experiment with these things. So we go in and go, okay, so I'm going to take this and maybe I can take this and I can even copy and paste it a few times. So I just copied and pasted it. And maybe I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it over a lot of moments that have that same thing. Joof. Joof. You can see I'm sort of roughly corresponding it to the different drum beats, right? You can see there are these moments. But sometimes it's just fun, it's good to just experiment. So. Yeah, just kind of like, and the nice thing about it is that a technique like that, you almost get results without really needing to have a very specific idea of the effect that you're going after, right? If you just look at the music and you're like, okay, there's this little section that I kind of feels different, right? Like that.
Like those.
And you know, okay, so the song is kind of operating with little blocks of rhythm that maybe are like about that long. You can just cut a piece out that's that long and just start putting it places. And it actually starts to create a sort of rhythmic association in your mind. Well, it's you can experiment with it for yourself. So for now, I'm going to end this screen recording and walk around the class a little bit, and then maybe we'll come back a little bit later to see where we're at.